for this closing panel of today's OpenStack Israel, we would like to explore something that I would consider, and I hope you agree, a defining feature of the OpenStack community, that being the coexistence of a very collaborative development community with a fairly competitive business community. And now that OpenStack is going into its 5th year and the business community around it is accordingly maturing, and with it the associated competition, then maybe it's time to ask whether the gloves have come off, whether it's sort of the end of the honeymoon, whether the forces of competition are taking over, or if maybe this is a great new opportunity for OpenStack to maintain this collaborative engineering model that it has had while fostering a competitive business. This is your chance to get involved. If you snap a picture of this QR code here, it will take you right to Twitter and will make you tweet with the hashtag OSILP for OpenStack Israel panel, because that will just take too many characters of your precious 140 if actually spelled out. So please put your hashtag OSILP, and then we'll be able to pop your questions at the panel. So, by way of introduction for my 5 panelists here today, we have Mark, the founder of Canonical and Ubuntu, and quite possibly the only person to arrive at this event by private jet. We have another Mark from Red Hat, who is a consulting software engineer in the office of the CTO at Red Hat, and arguably one of Red Hat's faces of OpenStack. We have another Mark, McClain, from Yahoo, who, of course, is an architect and senior principal engineer there and is well known for being the OpenStack Neutron PTL. And I thank HP for not sending my dear friend Mark Atwood, because that would be my 4th Mark here. It's Monty Taylor, from Hewlett-Packard, who is a person who... What is that?
You can call me Mark if you want to.
No, I pass. Thank you. Maybe I can call one of the other Marks Monty.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. Anyway, so not Monty Taylor is someone who was sort of elbow deep in OpenStack from the get-go. And he is now pretty much Mr. Infrastructure for OpenStack, who works for HP. And then we have Benny Schneider from Ravello Systems, who is the co-founder, chairman, and president there, and was previously the CEO of Kubernetes, which of course developed KVM, which is a technology that is very important in OpenStack today. Now, as you may have noticed, Benny is the only Israeli on our panel, and as such, he certainly needs no introduction to the following concept, which, however, I will briefly explain to our other speakers, because arguably, as I've learned, it is one of the most important concepts that I've been confronted with in this country.
Oh yeah, clearly.
Right? So I found it a bit hard, a bit difficult to translate tachlis in a way that fully grasps the concept, but when applied to a conversation, and folks, please keep me honest here, straight talk or hard talk is probably a good enough approximation. So let me just put it this way as a word of advice. In this country, it's generally considered rude to beat around the bush. And so please take that as an invitation to speak your mind freely, because it will be much appreciated by everyone. So with that, we go to our first question that I would like to pitch to the panel. And this is actually a question for all of them, not to one in particular, and we're just going to do it as they're lined up here. And my first question to you is going to be, for your specific company, is there or has there ever been a policy in effect that would discourage the collaboration between your own OpenStack engineers and those of any other company? Has there ever been any intervention sort of from the business side of things that discouraged collaboration on the engineering level? Mark would like to start. That's Mr. McLoughlin for clarity here.
Perfectly happy to go first. Absolutely not. Never would be. Never will be. Totally against.
Grab the mic, because this is not picking up.
Yeah, I'm saying absolutely not. Absolutely never will be. Totally against Red Hat's ethos. We inculcate in all our engineers from the very beginning the concept of wearing 2 hats: wearing your upstream hat, wearing your Red Hat hat. And your red hat.
Yeah.
And where you feel the interests of the project are somehow in conflict with the interests of the company, that is kind of your responsibility for figuring a path out there that kind of works for both. So what you're referring to, if you don't want me to beat around the bush, is an internal memo which was leaked to the Wall Street Journal, and it had a quote in it which said, "Do not work with Mirantis," and that was explicitly around a partnership between Red Hat and Mirantis, which had fallen apart, and that quote was specifically about salespeople not working together, so it was nothing to do with the OpenStack engineering efforts upstream.
Next, Mark.
Yeah, I'd say on our side, canonically not. In fact, the policy is very explicitly to find opportunities for collaboration. There are no smoking gun memos to suggest otherwise for canonical. And in fact, even at a sales level, one of our key sort of points of pride is that usually when we go in to see a customer, there are other vendors at the table as well. You know, we think it's a very sterile world. You know, platforms are in a very dangerous position. They can eat the world. Microsoft tried to eat the world. You know, other platforms try to eat the world, and I think it's a very dangerous thing for a platform to do. So we culturally actively work against that by saying find other brands, find other vendors, bring them in.
And Monty wants to go before the next Mark. That's fine.
It's, I mean, I'm telling you, you can call me Mark. I don't want to get out of sequence of the discussion of the marks. So not to beat around the bush, to try and do that, I think that I can't say that as categorically as from the HP perspective, and not because of lack of intent. The intent has always been extremely clear at the executive level at HP that we should be in this, and we should be in it clearly to collaborate with everybody. HP's been around for a long time. I don't know if you know this, but we have a lot of people, somewhere in the range of over 250,000 of them. And so messages disseminate slower there than they do at some of the smaller, more nimble companies. And so there's a bunch of people who've been attacking the world of business from a particular worldview over the past several years. And it takes a little bit longer for the gears to start shifting in another way. And I think we've done a really good job over the last several years in actually driving this to the place where we want it to be, which is that everyone at HP is actually collaborating with everybody upstream. But there's internal processes that people actually don't need to be doing, but they still haven't figured out that they don't need to be doing them. And so these are the challenges that we actually have to face. So the intent from our side is that we do this, and there is actually no real policy in place. But sometimes people don't know that. Sometimes people don't realize actually yet, because of the inertia that there isn't that policy in place. And it's a sort of daily thing that I work on there to make sure that information is gotten out to everybody.
So out of the three speakers that have answered up to this point, all of them have sort of a direct product strategy that is directly related to OpenStack. And Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, for Yahoo that's not necessarily the case because you're not doing a Yahoo public cloud. Maybe you were planning that or not, or feel free to put it. But yeah, exactly. This is your chance to announce it. But what is from someone from a company that primarily contributes to OpenStack for making it better for its own internal service use? What's your perspective on this?
Yeah, so that's exactly what I was going to touch on. So we're a consumer. We want OpenStack to be as good as it possibly can be, as stable as it possibly can be, and perform as well. So from that standpoint, we have Open RAN within the OpenStack team to contribute upstream to ensure that. The benefit to everybody else is that as OpenStack gets better, it's good for everybody, and also we don't have to make modifications that work internally for us. So our charge is, and one of the things I do internally is go through our current deployments and our patches and make sure they get pushed upstream. So that way they're shared for everybody. And similarly with talking, we network with other service providers as well to ensure that the communication lines are open for developers, because we want OpenStack to grow and be stable for everyone. There's no competitive advantage for us to hoard stuff or to not. And we have internal people whose job is to facilitate upstream and clear any red tape that might arise.
And Vinny?
So in Ravello, we are not exactly developing OpenStack software, as you all know. So our best interest is pretty much similar to Yahoo, to have the OpenStack as robust and as reliable as possible, to have yet another infrastructure that we can run on. But I want to add a comment from my old days at Reddit, just after the acquisition. Having a policy in a development organization like Reddit is almost like an oxymoron. Your ability to control and tell engineers what to do is very limited. And the higher the manager you are, the less influence you have. So you can always build a direct formula here, how little influence you really have on some of the hardcore open source developers. So I don't think you will find a real policy that's anti the open source culture.
So before I go to my next question, which actually hooks in something that Benny has just been saying, one thing that I forgot to mention earlier, another way for you to get involved in the discussion, other than Twitter, is of course to raise your hand and I'll be racing up to you with the mic and we'll be happy to take the question that way. Mark, you have a question.
Yeah, well, I have an observation. This panel exists because clearly there's been talk about tension in the OpenStack community, and yet we've just gone through the whole list and there's no tension whatsoever. Right?
Yeah,
so
wait
I
up.
think we need to
we're going to do our best about that.
Right. So but I think we need to sort of dig in because there's all sorts of mistaken language, I think, that really doesn't help. So collaboration. What's collaboration? It means working together, right? It actually means doing work, and this gets misunderstood in many cases, right? Sometimes people think collaboration means you get what you want from somebody else. And they particularly think that when they don't get what they want from someone else. So the easiest thing, the nastiest thing you can say about someone who disagrees with you is that they're not collaborative. And actually it's quite toxic because the reality is for OpenStack to succeed, it needs strong leadership, it needs opinionated leadership, which means there's going to be a bunch of people in the room who don't get what they want. And I think the most difficult thing that everyone else can do then is to say, oh, there's no collaboration here. Because in fact, those two things, we need to have a nuanced view of what collaboration actually feels like, right? It doesn't necessarily feel easy. It doesn't necessarily feel like you're getting everything that you want. And I think part of the problem at the moment is that because the pressure is ramped up, because everybody feels OpenStack's so important to them, because they've got to go home and report what they got done, right? That the easiest thing for them to say sometimes is, oh, the other guys weren't collaborative, right? And that unfortunately creates an atmosphere that's not really reflective of reality.
Yeah, I think that's actually, I see this happening a decent amount. And when I was mentioning sort of the struggles of taking sort of a large organization through a transformation like we're doing in the cloud world right now, you'll have some folks who are used to sort of an internal process where one person's manager tells another person's manager that this is going to be the thing that's done, and you have to do it at this point in time, and they've got a time pressure on it, and they get up to work with the community, and put an idea out, and somebody else will say, yeah, that's not really gonna work, for these reasons, and they'll come back feeling that they've gotten shot down because of their company allegiance, or because somebody else has something out for them because of something. And I know this, not just folks at HP. I've heard this from other sort of smaller companies trying to get involved. And they're like, why doesn't anybody like our company? Like, what is it about what we're doing? I'm like, we're not. We aren't doing that. But we're also not just going to say yes to everything that you suggest, because not all of the solutions that you're suggesting are a good idea. Like, some of them would be the worst idea ever, and we're gonna stand pretty strong on that. So yeah, that's exactly right.
Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so I just wanted to mention the fact that within the project, I think we're doing something very unusual where we've developed this governance model that's really very deliberately kept kind of some of these corporate kind of competitive pressures out of the project, and we've kind of ring-fenced the actual technical work that's going in the project underneath the technical community as one kind of independent governance body, and we very strongly discourage some of these competitive pressures coming within the project. So we discourage people from talking about their affiliations or for representing their affiliations kind of subtly. We for things like, I'm not sure why you're laughing here, but for things like the trademark, the governance of the OpenStack trademark, that is a decision that is really subject to a lot of corporate pressure, a lot of corporate politics, and people have vested interest there. And we've deliberately kept that at the board level to try and make those decisions where people are explicitly representing their companies on the board and hash out the issues there and keep them outside of the project.
I am about to come back to that with a question that is actually related to some actions of the foundation board. But you mentioned, both of you mentioned larger companies versus smaller companies, and in front of that backdrop, I'd like to ask Mark, and Monty, all of whom are on the payroll of very well-established publicly listed companies, where would you think the actual interesting innovation in the OpenStack space is happening? Is it happening at the large established companies that pour a lot of resources and money into OpenStack, or is the real interesting innovation happening at startups that then may be gobbled up by one of the large established ones? Where is it? What are the actual innovation powerhouses in the OpenStack community and everything that's related to it, like Open vSwitch, like software-defined storage, like orchestration management, etc.
I think it's. I don't think that's happening at one or the other, and a little bit of that is to Mark's point. Really, I can just say to Mark's point, pretty much to anything. This is just too much fun. To Mark's point about how, first of all, at the technical side, we do try and keep it to be. A lot of people sort of self-associate with as a person who works on OpenStack rather than rather than as a person who works for Yahoo or whatever. Sometimes to the chagrin of our employers. But I think that we're actually seeing good amounts of innovation in both of those places. In fact, surprisingly so sometimes. If you think about again a really big company like mine, it's not exactly, you don't normally think of that as being where innovation happens, because the normal thought these days is the big company lumbers along and a small company has innovation and gets bought. But in this case, because we've got this place to work. It's not necessarily about the company innovating in some ways as much as the engineers at the company. And the engineers at the company are all extremely smart, right? And so they can do work. And the big company has the benefit of having the space and the breadth to let the engineer do whatever they need to do without necessarily having to turn a quarterly profit on that engineer that moment. The smaller company, on the other hand, has the benefit of the typical normal nimble startup thing, right? Like from a company perspective, they can actually try some really interesting company directives, which then push the engineers in that group to potentially explore an avenue in a particular way to achieve a business goal. And I actually think that the really interesting thing about OpenStack right now is that we've got those two different backgrounds of pushing or providing an environment in which an engineer can do work to come together and work on a single thing, so that we actually get sort of the best of both worlds of those models, and also sometimes the worst of both worlds of those models, because it's you put that many engineers together in a pile, and you're not always going to get ponies and rainbows. I don't know. It's just me talking. I was supposed to be talking about myself, right? Okay.
We have a question up here.
Hello. My question is that while it is very encouraging to hear both, for example, Red Hat and Canonical talk about collaboration, actually in the real world we see that there are a lot of projects that became real battlefields between different companies, especially in the open source. I don't know, there are quite a few examples that come to mind, like Wayland Mir, for example, display servers that is happening right now. There are other projects. So why it's been so hard to collaborate and move together in other projects? Or on the other hand, what makes OpenStack so different that we actually see the level of collaboration that we probably haven't seen before between the companies that compete with each other?
So maybe Benny wants to take the first shot at this, because he's been a part of sort of serial open source communities here. How does it compare?
So first of all, when you look just at the previous question on innovation, KVM was definitely a unique innovation that came from a small startup in Israel. I will not go through the history because you will not believe how we came to it. There are a few people here from Kubernetes in the old days, but I think it's an example where it has been around, and the startup environment was definitely an encouraging place, because if you don't innovate and if you're not unique, you don't have place in this ecosystem. Anyhow, I think trying to answer your question, there is one thing which is unique. Everybody is trying to compare OpenStack to Linux and kind of saying, look at what Linux has been before, how much it took it to get over, and eventually it took over from the Unix and then from some of the Windows setups. I think the unique thing about Linux, which is really missing here, is somebody like Linus Torvalds. So in his case, I don't know if anybody enjoyed getting any email from Linus telling him how idiot he is. So this is as opposed to collaboration and being a nice guy and being the type of things that you heard so far. This is back to the tachlis that you heard before. There was a policeman. There is no longer a nice guy. You have to do it my way or the highway. And I can tell you there are several engineers in Kubernetes where I have to go in the old days and tell them, are you still okay? Was Linus insulting you? And it was, no, it's okay. That's the way we operate, and we understand this culture, and this is part of how we operate. I think we are two nice guys here in the OpenStack community, where we don't have the bad guy like Linus that everybody appreciate and have high respect to it. And because of that, we are not reaching fast enough to the critical mass on OpenStack.
Well, Benny, you have a great opportunity to insult 4 OpenStack thought leaders here, so you might as well seize it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I actually just want to build on what Benny said. When I said earlier that in fact I thought it would be good in OpenStack if we had stronger leadership, which would mean that you'd have more people feeling like they weren't going to get what they necessarily wanted. I think we're on the same sort of wavelength, that collaboration just for the sake of collaboration, if you assume that it means that everybody's going to get what they want, is actually pretty toxic to getting a great result. What you want in something like OpenStack is a meritocracy, where actually the smartest guy in the room is driving an open platform and feels empowered to be open about how to drive that thing forward. And that's not necessarily like super collaborative, right? If there is a weakness, I was having a chuckle earlier because in the OpenStack environment, I think we pay too much lip service to neutrality. I just don't think it's credible to ask people to take off, to have different hats, What do you do about their t-shirts, right? We are affiliated. It is the elephant in the room. I actually prefer it if I know exactly who's in charge. Like I liked MySQL being run by MySQL, right? It's a company, they have an agenda. Part of that is to make a great database, and they're motivated to do that. I think that's great. Find a way to collaborate with them on those terms. And I think in OpenStack, we might, if we really wanted to think deeper about governance and leadership, we might say, is it smart for us to be voting for a technical lead? Right? We've all seen the ballot stuffing, right? We've all seen the ballot stuffing. Companies encourage their people to go and make an independent choice. If you did the statistical analysis on those votes, it would be company colors 90% of the time, right? So I prefer a slightly more blunt, honest approach. Figure out who the smartest guys are, delegate to them, maybe make them work for the foundation if you really want them to be neutral, right? Make them neutral, let them work for the foundation the way Linus works for the Linux Foundation, and then let them lead. Right? Let them make tough choices, which people will find not collaborative, but at least they're doing what they absolutely think is best.
So just one question there. Do the other 2 Marks and Monty agree with Mark's analysis that PTL voting is essentially along company lines? Or would you like to critique or rebut that?
I kind of feel that's a minor point in the many points Mark was making there. no PTL voting isn't along company lines. We've seen some instance of it. Certainly, in the project Mark was PTL of that. We've seen that happen, but that project was particularly notorious for some members of the project being, I guess, more representative of their affiliation. And that's something that Mark was doing a lot of work on to clean up. So we see some instances of it, but that's not the culture within the project. That's not the thing the three of us try and build day to day. There are absolutely tough decisions being made on the project. There is a lot of deep thought going into our governance. There is a lot of evolution going on. And I think it's very easy from the outside to dismiss our efforts to build this culture, to build this governance model. And like to go back to some of the tough decision we're making. Monty and I were just talking today about, the kind of decision-making process that the Nova team is going through at the moment, whether to accept a Docker driver and accept an Ironic driver. And in that case, the Nova team is actually being very stringent about certain quality levels and certain requirements before a driver can be merged. And Monty and I actually feel that team is going a little bit too far because, there's an opportunity there to build a community around these groups of people who want to contribute this code. So there's a fine balance between, being very strongly kind of stringent leader versus, understanding how to build a community. And, we try and walk that line, I guess, every day of the week.
Yeah, actually, it's interesting that you brought up MySQL, because I was actually going to reference that as well. A thing that people may or may not know is the level of lineage that we talk a lot about Rackspace and NASA and their sort of role in starting it. But actually there's really a third, there's actually a third and a fourth. I'd put Canonical and, or Ubuntu and MySQL in there because a lot of us that put it together, we're drawing, like we've got the design summits, we've got the cadences and, a bunch of stuff that we drew from the Ubuntu lineage. One of the things that we drew from the MySQL lineage was a wanting to attempt to have a better open development model than MySQL had, because it certainly had a market-leading position, and it had just the worst time in actually, like, there's the infamous Google patches that Google fixed a whole bunch of things in MySQL scalability, and it took 2 years to get merged into MySQL because, of the reasons, because there wasn't an open development model. So it's possible so that was one of the things that we wanted to solve, like in starting a new thing, coming from some previous projects, how can we move this forward and learn from, but take the next step. I think that to Mark's point, I'm gonna enjoy that every time. To Mark's point about the strong leadership, I think that we did go through a period where the technical leadership of the project wasn't pushing hard enough, and was not asserting itself as well. And over the last cycle or two, has really been trying to find its feet on how to be more assertive, how the TC can fill that not void, but fill those shoes more effectively, because in the absence of that, in the absence of a strong leadership, we do see things start to go into the weeds in some places. You do need some firm things, but at the same time, the one thing that I would disagree with is the assertion that you want it to be the smartest person in the room. And the reason for that is that the smartest person in the room has the problem of not necessarily being able to be fully understood by everybody else in the room. We have some extremely smart people who sometimes write some extremely great code, and then nobody else can debug it because it's too smart. And that's so one of the things that we try and deal with there is how do we, and we see that as a potential community scaling bottleneck. Whereas if we can find the right balance, I'm not necessarily saying we have, but the goal is to find the right balance where we can get the work out of the really smart people and really get the benefit of them without disenfranchising any of the people who may not be rocket scientists. And it's a daily challenge. It's, gosh, again, rooms full of smart people.
So I promised you a question about foundation activism versus the opposite. And one of the things that I would like to take out of this here as a point of discussion is, well, first off, do we generally agree that training people on OpenStack is a good thing? Like being able to offer training to people other than developers on OpenStack, I think is is a given. It's a nice thing to have.
No, you can't figure it out yourself. You're not worthy.
You're expelled, sir. So my question for you is, and I'm having to skip over a few here. Let's see. Where's that? There we go. What is that? Yeah, just a second. Where's that? Flavio, is that on topic for that last one? Or? Okay. Do you want to take it later on, or what? No, go ahead. No, that's fine.
So no, I just want to add something to the whole, what's the difference between OpenStack and other projects and the communities. And I think the main difference is actually the community and not the project itself. And the fact that our community is actually built from many people that have experiences from other communities, and they know what is good about those communities, and they know what they don't want to see in our community. And I strongly don't believe that the whole leadership process in OpenStack is based on companies, and actually most of the companies that are here encourage people to be just upstream and think what is best for OpenStack, and we already said this. So the whole leadership process and PDL elections and technical committee elections are based on people that is actually capable of speaking up in the community and being able to share their own opinions and making OpenStack a better project, actually. So it's all about community for me. It's not about the companies or the project itself.
Take that in a second. The next question that I have here on the slide is: do you consider it a missed opportunity for the OpenStack Foundation to not act as an independent certification body for like OpenStack knowledge and training? So for those of you who are unaware, there was some discussion at the OpenStack board level and in working groups and so forth, in which the idea was that possibly we could have this independent foundation also act as an independent certification body for people to get trained and then certified as OpenStack engineers or associates and so forth. That didn't materialize. Is that something that you consider sort of a missed opportunity and something that we should learn from and do better next time? Or do you think that's actually a great thing? Say again? So, okay. I know, but let's just not go overboard. Let's stick to one specific area that makes it easier to discuss and harder to ramble. Yeah, I know Monty can ramble anything. So Mark, what's your thoughts on this?
So this is on training in particular, is it?
On certification in particular, yeah. And in this case, I'm talking about
certification of training.
Yeah, I'm talking
like
certification of training
drivers
as opposed to
okay.
certification of hardware. Yes.
Yeah, I'm trying to actually recall the conversation at the board level. I know I probably wrote a summary of it on my blog, but yeah, I think the conclusion we came to in the end is that we could come up with some base, kind of base knowledge, base training that's common across all OpenStack products, and this would be kind of base certification level that the OpenStack Foundation could certify, and then other companies would offer training on top of it, and that would extend it. So that any kind of OpenStack training program, if it comes from like Rackspace or Red Hat or wherever, would also include this kind of basic level of OpenStack training that's certified by the foundation. So I think that was kind of a nice balance was found there. I wouldn't like to see the case of, say, the foundation taking upon itself the responsibility for all OpenStack training out there and kind of preventing, some innovation in the training market happening.
So what you're summarizing is that even though it may not have been sort of a perfect decision, it was the best decision available at the time?
No, I think it was a good trade-off decision. It was a perfect decision.
Fair enough. Yeah. Monty, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, because I think one of the points latent in there is that we don't necessarily want the foundation to become I don't know, I haven't picked on anybody yet this entire conference. I don't think we want to become like the Mozilla Foundation, right? Where it's like, it's all a one-stop shop. We actually really do want the different companies who are selling products that are selling OpenStack or selling OpenStack-based products. That's actually an explicit choice that's a value of what we're doing. We want Canonical and Red Hat and HP to all be able to sell OpenStack products and have that be like a valued thing. It's important, actually, it's explicitly important that we all do. If HP won, that would actually be bad for the effort that we're trying to do here. to the detriment of those. So in that sense, one of the things that we were talking about the training certification thing is, if we all of a sudden came out with that, then that potentially has that actually has a potential market dampening effect on other companies' ability to offer those things, and it wasn't really a thing that was necessarily needed for us to come in with a heavy hand. The sort of the market force there was sort of fine, and we weren't really seeing a lot of abuses of the situation, and it sort of allows the people to do this. So I think it was actually, to Mark's point, I think it was a good, a good balance.
And actually, just one thought at that, you could apply that whole logic to like technical matters as well. But I think what's different about the training situation is there isn't a huge amount of likelihood of collaboration, like in the open around training programs or whatever. So if there had been that opportunity for a massive amount of upstream collaboration around training programs, then perhaps the foundation should have encouraged that. But that didn't seem to be forthcoming.
Would you like to add to that, considering the work that Sean Roberts has done at Yahoo?
I totally respect the work he's doing, and I think it's absolutely great, and I'd love to see it. But what I'm talking about is the equivalence of the amount of effort that goes into the various corporate training programs. For that to go back into the upstream project, that wasn't likely to happen. That's what I mean.
Okay, so just as a little bit of background, for those of you who are interested in this, there's been a series of sessions at the OpenStack Summit, for which you can, of course, take a look at YouTube and the slides and whatnot, by, what's Sean's role within Yahoo? Is he an OpenStack engineer generally, or what's? He's an infrastructure guy. Yeah, he's an infrastructure guy at Yahoo, who basically put together a curriculum for community OpenStack training, and if you're interested in that, by all means, do take a look, which has nothing to do with certification, because, as I said, the OpenStack Foundation took itself out of this, and it's a purely community-oriented training approach there. I'll take your question in a second, and I would like to pose this one, and I'd like, Benny, for you to take this first before we open up to the rest of the panel. Where do you think, as someone who has a sort of a fair amount of expertise as a serial entrepreneur in this space, where do you think is the greatest potential for truly disruptive business in OpenStack? Where do you think are the things where OpenStack can really turn an industry on its head? I'm guessing it's probably not public cloud necessarily, because it's not doing something completely awesomely new there. But are there specific markets or specific areas where you see actual disruptive potential for OpenStack?
Yeah, I definitely see it. And in general, open source still recently have been a commoditization solution of the proprietary alternative. So I think at the state of the OpenStack right now, it's kind of too difficult to get to this point. I think there is a huge opportunity. If the data that I'm getting is right, we are about $5 billion market penetration on public cloud right now, out of a potential of about 150. So this means that we have only about 3% penetration of the market right now. And I think the real opportunity is to somebody to take the OpenStack as part of a bigger solution. So let's take some of the industries that still have the potential to go to the public cloud, for example, or to go to outside cloud. These are industries that are severely under regulation. So for example, the financial guys, they have huge investment in infrastructure, in IT, and they already reached the conclusion that IT doesn't matter. So I'm using the Nick Carr book, Does IT Matter? The answer was no. So they came to this conclusion, and building a vertical cloud for a vertical market like the financial, where OpenStack is a building block. The company who is going to do it will basically build a service on top of OpenStack, where from business perspective, OpenStack is only one of the very important but very hidden part from the customer side. We can see it also at the pharmaceutical companies. We can see it also in other regulated, like the healthcare industry, where somebody will come and use OpenStack as a building block to change the business on his head. So if the alternative before was a CRM system from Oracle or Siebel or whoever it was, there is now an opportunity to deliver a vertical solution where OpenStack is only a building block. Whoever is going to do it can get away from all the current problems of interoperability and other things by holding the whatever release he wants and have full control of vertically integrated solution.
Mark, do you want to add your perspective?
Yeah, for me, just it's been a kind of a light has come on recently, really finally, going to enough NFV presentations and finally understanding the implications of it, getting past the acronym-laden terms that's in these presentations. I mean, and it goes to your point, Benny, about kind of a vertically integrated solution. There is a massive opportunity out there with the telecom industry at the moment who are going through a transformation from, this kind of old architecture of, hardware-based appliances to, commodity-based virtualized scale-out solutions, and that entire industry is basically betting on OpenStack to be the management plane there. And I think that's a huge disruption for that industry, and it's a massive opportunity for OpenStack.
And we'll take one final question.
Going back to the last topic, and I know I'm coming from a place where I have no idea what's going on behind the scenes, but you said that possibly training and certification wasn't appropriate because it would focus on one thing and not the other, and not be complete. But you have, with going back to Linux, which I know is not relevant here, there's the LPIC certifications, which you learn about the Red Hat and similar distributions as well as the Debian and similar. So it basically gives you a picture of all of them and has you become fluent in that. Why can't, if there's one overall authority in this, create some sort of training like that where you learn about everything as a package and then make your decisions?
I think part of the thing is we're just about to have our 4th birthday, and if you think about where the Linux distribution landscape was at a similar point in Linux's history, I believe Slackware was still important, and so it's taken us a long time in the Linux world to get to the point where there are, for all practical purposes, basically 2 real forks of the road in the like you meant the 2 you just mentioned, right? And so if you actually learn about those 2 ecosystems, then you actually have a pretty decent knowledge of sort of what's going on in the landscape, and also the ways in which those are varying from over a 6-month to 9-month to 12-month period of time isn't like massively significantly different. If you look at the landscape of distros in the OpenStack world right now, and we've got 3 different ones represented just up on stage here. We've got our friends at Cloud Scaling, at Piston, at Nebula, who are all doing completely different things. And I think we actually just don't know enough. Once you start having like foundation run certification programs, then you're sort of starting to draw lines in the sand of this is what reality is. And I think that by the time that reality was described, it would be like a year out of date. And so I think we're just moving too fast still to try and encapsulate that and capture it and codify it. And we haven't had the time for things to shake out and to figure out who's gonna be the, what is it, Grisel, whatever, we don't even, this is the last time anybody installed that. Like it's we haven't had that shakeout yet. And I'm sure it's gonna come at some point. And we'll start to collapse down into a few ways of doing things rather than 100,000 ways of doing things. Maybe we never will, but somewhere in there, I think it's just too soon.
I think there's a useful test for when you probably want to get governance involved. And the test is, does it matter to the user? So for example, in the conversation about what's core or what's certified or what's standard in OpenStack, the key question should be like, does it matter to the user? So does it matter to the user of 3 different OpenStack clouds how that cloud was installed? No, it doesn't. It should never matter. In that case, you should keep governance out of it, because what you want is innovation, right? You want people competing and trying different things, and we've got like 9 different ways to install OpenStack. It's brilliant. They will shake out, they'll get better. That's great. So keep the foundation out of that, keep that out of core. Does it matter if the APIs are common? Yes, it does, right? It matters to a potential user of a cloud if they have tools that will talk to one OpenStack cloud, whether those will talk to a different OpenStack cloud. So there's a nice test that you can use as to whether we probably want to get governance, and in this case, the foundation, involved. So I'd be totally thumbs up on the foundation certifying clouds as being that's an OpenStack cloud or that's not an OpenStack cloud. I'd be against them getting into things that essentially are very specific to a particular set of choices of tools and that ultimately don't influence whether the cloud presents in a standard kind of way. Is that useful as a test?
And there's one addendum to that which is interesting, and I know we're sort of at the last. To Mark's point, there's and I know we're sort of at the end here, not to open up a semantic discussion, but a interesting issue that we have is actually, and I think everybody that does a product or does a thing, you need to understand who your users are, right? And Mark said users, and I think that's spot on. We've had a really interesting couple of years with the definition of that word, because different people actually assume that our users are different. It's actually reasonably recent in the life of the project, and whereas being a user of several OpenStack clouds myself, I think it's extremely important that they behave similarly. There was a period of time really early on where I believe that the common belief was that the user of OpenStack were the deployers, and that is actually. That is a certain classification and a quality of that. And so we've actually got this thing where is Rackspace and HP's public cloud teams, are they the users of OpenStack or are their customers the users of OpenStack? And it's, I actually think that they both are in different facets and we have to consider both of them, but I basically bring it up because we do everything we can to make things as unstraightforward as humanly possible when we try and deal with some of these hard questions. And so I find myself having to say yes and a lot too. Yes, that's exactly right. And then also, how do we deal with people trying to make products, helping people make products that they're going to ship to somebody who's going to be running one of these darn things. And I don't have an answer for that.
Just another thought on when it's appropriate for governance to be involved. I think what we're seeing with the core definition process is that governance is a really slow way to kind of force collaboration to happen, and we shouldn't be jumping straight away to governance to make collaboration happen. If there's collaboration happening in the training space, great, we should allow it and encourage it to happen. Governance doesn't need to get involved. If there's collaboration happening around installers, if there's collaboration happening around interoperability, just let that collaboration happen. Governance doesn't need to jump in to force it.
Okay, thanks. And with that, do you want to add one more final thought? Go ahead.
Mm-hmm. So I talked earlier a little bit about the use of the label collaboration and telling the difference between someone whining because they're not getting what they want and someone who's genuinely a problem from a collaboration point of view. There's another thing that is really important to sort of recognize at a human level, that everybody on this panel has a hell of a lot more in common with each other than with just about anybody else on the planet. We're brothers. And it is just true about humans that we often reserve our harshest language for our family members. Don't know why, but we do. And culturally, I really enjoy the Aegean, right? So I struggle to know which side of the Aegean is nicer, right? The food seems to me to be exactly the same. The drink seems to be exactly the same. The ocean seems to be exactly the same. They find different language and find things that to them are really important to create divides. We see exactly the same thing, on borders. You have peoples that are basically exactly the same, but they find their differences and amplify their differences. You asked a question at the back about, why you've seen such overt problems collaborating. You're missing the point. What you're seeing there is headlines about small differences that are being massively amplified because we have to find things to talk about and journalists have to find something to print. The reality is, and I think it's really important for us to remember, we're brothers, right? And we agree on vastly, vastly more, right, about how software should be built, about how it should be consumed, about where innovation comes from, and so on. We agree on vastly, vastly more than we disagree on. It's just that we can easily be led to a point where those disagreements become dominant in the conversation, or they become dominant in the media coverage of the conversation.
So with those words, we're going to wrap it up. I apologize to those people who did send a question in on Twitter. I'm sorry, we're out of time. We can't cover those. I would ask you to join me in thanking our panelists this afternoon. I'm sure my panelists will join me in encouraging you to experiment, collaborate, and contribute to OpenStack. So please keep doing that.